Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. Today is the first big one-day monument of the 2023 season. It's Milan-San Remo, 294 kilometers. Guys, they're going to do over 300K on their bikes today, and they're going to do over 200 miles on their bikes. Now, the last two climbs are going to be the highlight here of Milan-San Remo, just as they are every year. We're talking about the Cipressa and the Poggio. Both climbs are always going to play a factor here at Milan-San Remo, whether if you're going uphill or if you're going down the twisty descents all the way back onto the promenade to finish out Milan-San Remo to see who wins the first big monument of 2023. Now, if you guys remember right, of course, we saw some action from Pre-Poggio last year. We saw Mathieu bombing down the descents recklessly and holding on to win Milan-San Remo with amazing descending skills of almost crashing multiple times, but a little bit of help from the motos up front to give them a draft. We won't see that this year. That's always the MO in bike racing. Whenever you start seeing the cars or the motorcycles have some kind of big time effect, always the following year, you know, in the press conference and all that stuff, when they're talking to all the officials, they're telling the motorcycle bikes, the camera ones, and the still camera guys, you can't play a factor in who's going to win Milan-San Remo. So this year, we're not going to see that same kind of benefit that Mathieu had at last year's 2022 edition here when he won Milan-San Remo. When the racing starts, as predicted, 9 riders go up the road. They're Micro Maestri from Iolo Cometa, his teammate Revi, Alessandro Tunelli from Green Projects there, along with his teammate Zaccarato. Alexander Balmer from Jayco and his teammate Mas is there. And then we have Abria from Q36.5, Alexander Rabushenko from Astana, and Charin from Tudor Cycling. Now, with these 9 riders, they're only going to get about 3.5 minutes total time on the Peloton behind because we got 4 big teams riding back there. Jumbo-Visma's interested in riding, Trek Segafredo, UAE team members, we know they're interested, and of course Albacete de Koenig, because Mathieu van der Poel and Jasper Philipsen are on the squad here to try to win here at Milan-San Remo. So with those 4 big teams pulling back there, the gap's never going to get that big, and when we get on the coast, the gap's already down to 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30 back there to the Peloton still being led by those four teams. Not really going to see big time action until we get in there about 65 kilometers to go. We start seeing the Peloton get nervous. We start coming into the roundabouts, and then you see Jan Tratnik from Jumbo-Visma have some problems. Doesn't come off his bike, but he's going to have more problems later as we get closer to the Cipressa here. Jan Tratnik's going to have some more bad luck and come off his bike when we start getting into the real crunch time. Now, with the nervousness of that 65 kilometers to go mark, and when we start seeing a lot of the roundabouts coming into play with all the cars parked on the side and the roads narrowing and the buildings coming in closer with only one lane to pass through, that's what's causing all the nervous here at Milan-San Remo, and the fact that it's the first monument of the 2023 season, so everybody wants to win, and tension's tight as we start getting under 50 kilometers to go. Now we start getting to 35, and we're going to see a big crash because it's Bora Hansgrohe on the left side. There was some kind of bike parking spot there, and bus stop or something on the side sticking out in the road. Bora Hansgrohe, Sam Bennett gets lost as he goes down, takes down a couple DSM riders and one of his teammates. So that's 4 riders out, and Sam Bennett's chance here at Milan-San Remo is wiped out with the crash here with 35 kilometers to go. Just about 30K to go. That group of 9, which has been reduced on the first 3 capo climbs just before the Cipressa started, is down to 6 riders. Now they're getting wrapped up with about 27, 28 kilometers to go, and it's right before the Cipressa starts proper. So there's a little bit of chaos in the Peloton there as we start seeing the 6 breakaway guys holding off to the very end are getting caught, and we see guys waving their hands trying to get to the side of the road as the Peloton's flying by the right bend there, getting ready to start the Cipressa. Once we're on the Cipressa proper, guess what? It's Lotto Destiny that won the battle, and Ineos is locked tightly on their wheel. Now we see as the rider pulls off the front, Ineos takes over on the front for a little bit, and then they back off, and it's Arnold de Lee up there, the sprinter, and he's working for his other sprinter, Caleb Ewan, back there. It looks like he has some fine legs to start the Cipressa here, right at the front of the peloton. Now, that doesn't stay too long because we know the MO of UAE Team Emirates. Tadej Pogacar is going to want to make it fast, so he puts his teammates on the front. It's Ulissi on the front, and he's going full gas there. Got the peloton hurt, and we start seeing the back end of the peloton struggling just a bit. And when we get back up to the front, it's going to be Großschartner, their climber, that put on such a display during Paris-Nice for Tadej Pogacar. He's on the front stringing everything out, and guys are starting to suffer in the peloton. It's getting reduced in size, but still not down to just the pure favorites. And then just as we start to crest the top, that's when you see Mathieu van der Poel come to the front. Ineos tried to get up there first too, but Mathieu van der Poel beat everybody to the punch before the descent starts proper, as we see the Netherlands riders dropping down the descent, and he's got some company in Søren Kragh Andersen, and along with Matteo Trentin from UAE Team Emirates, who will pass both those riders and do the descent on the front for his teammate Tadej Pogacar. Now, they get down to the flats proper, and all of a sudden, we start seeing that everybody's getting ready to battle for the Poggio. And up front, finally, we see Soudal Quickstep get wrapped around Julian Alaphilippe and start taking over the front of the peloton here with Florian Sénéchal. Alaphilippe, he'd went up the Cipressa in a pretty good position the whole time, but isolated without really any teammates around him. Now, as we see the flat section between the two famous climbs before the Poggio starts proper, it's Soudal Quickstep on the front. Florian Sénéchal's flying through the left-hand bend there, going wide all the way from the inside to the outside as he's going full gas. Once he pulls off, then we see Bahrain Victorious hop on the front. With Bahrain Victorious on the front, they're trying to drive because they have last year's winner, Matej Mohoric, locked onto the wheel. Just before as we come into the Poggio proper, all of a sudden with about 700 meters to go, it's EF Education on the front. They got two guys up there. Nielsen Palace has himself in the driving seat here at Milan-San Remo as we're getting ready to start the Poggio. They won't hold it for too long, but they'll do a solid job to keep up front. Let's back the camera up just a little bit because Wout van Aert got a little bit lost during this flat section before the Poggio started proper, as he's got Christophe Laporte flying through the left side of the peloton trying to bring him up to the front there before the Poggio starts. Now, once we get into the right bend chicane as the Poggio starts, Bahrain Victorious leads in full gas. EF Education did a solid job for Nielsen Palace there to start at the front. And Wout van Aert, along with some help from Christophe Laporte through the flat section, has found his way to the front. We look a little bit further back. Tadej Pogacar is not too far back there. Mathieu van der Poel, of course, locked on. Caleb Ewan's kind of close to the front, but the big-time top 5-star favorite up here on the Butterfly Effect, Julian Alaphilippe and his Quick-Step team have come up deuces when the Poggio starts. They're way back. Once we get further up the climb, all of a sudden now Bahrain Victorious is going a little bit too full gas at the bottom of this climb for my liking, because Matej Mohoric needs the pace to be a little bit slower so he can survive the climb with all the pure climbers. Now up front, we finally start to see UAE Team Emirates Plan A come into effect again, because this is the last chance for Tadej Pogacar to be able to ride everybody off his wheel. So he's got Tim Wellens hitting the front. With Wellens hitting the front, Tadej Pogacar locked onto his wheel. We see Filippo Ganna up there doing a solid job for Ineos, going full gas. As we come up to the left turn, Tim Wellens is going so fast he's got to coast through the turn because he's blazing up here on the Poggio. He'll come out of the turn, but let me back the film up just a little bit before the turn starts proper there, because it's Matej Mohoric along with Mathieu van der Poel, and they have to pass by Matteo Trentin, UAE Team Emirates, coming into the turn. As they come out of the turn, Matej Mohoric has to sprint around his teammate Peloton Bilbao, who's starting to drop now because he did some work on the front for Mohoric. So Bahrain Victorious is putting in a big time efforts here, Matej Mohoric, to close the gaps and get up to the back wheel there of Mads Pedersen, Filippo Ganna, and of course Tadej Pogacar, with his teammate being led out by Tim Wellens. Now Matej Mohoric does a great job of closing the gap with Mathieu van der Poel on his wheel. As we look further back, though, there's still gaps being caused back there from Matteo Trentin and Peloton Bilbao opening the gaps. and it's Benoit Cosnefroy from AG2R with Wout van Aert on his wheel, who got boxed in a little bit going into that left turn. Now Benoit Cosnefroy is closing the gaps with Wout van Aert on his wheel, and as the hill just eases up just a little bit as we're coming into the right turn, look at the picture there. It's Wout van Aert. He passes straight by Benoit Cosnefroy just as we're going in the right turn, and then slots onto the back wheel of Mathieu van der Poel to put himself in with a fight here, because you know Tadej Pogacar is going to start lighting this thing up pretty soon once Tim Wellens' energy finishes in the front. Now they come out of that right bend. Let's take another picture further back, because you got to go back down to 20th position to see where the Soudal Quickstep rider Julian Alaphilippe is. He's been caught way at the back here on the Poggio, having to make up places throughout the climb. Now he's still in 20th with one teammate in front of him. I believe it's Casper Asgreen, maybe Davide Ballerini. That's 2 spots in front of him. So Julian Alaphilippe has a little bit of help, but he can't quite get up to the front there. As we go further up, now all of a sudden Matteo Trentin starts to open up the gap off the wheel of Wout van Aert. That's why Wout van Aert was trying to close all those gaps earlier, because he knew Matteo Trentin was going to cause some problems. Now with Matteo Trentin opening the gap, Benoit Cosnefroy can't come around because he already did the big acceleration to close the gaps earlier when it was Pello Bilbao. And now with Benoit Cosnefroy sitting up, with Matteo Trentin sitting up, they'll move all the way to the left. We look further back down and you see it's Nielsen Palace. He's flying up the left side trying to close the gap, but he's not going to get much help, because up front, guess what? Tim Wellens is starting to die, and it's time for Tadej Pogacar to go to work. He jumps on the accelerator. He's got Søren Kragh Andersen locked on his wheel. Filippo Ganna is just behind there. And now we start seeing guys coming off the wheel as it's Mads Pedersen can't hold the wheel, and he starts to open up the gap. Now Wout van Aert's got to go to work. He throws in a hard acceleration on the pedal going up the left side. We see it's Mathieu van der Poel on his wheel, and then Søren Kragh Andersen will start to open up the gap to Tadej Pogacar as he can't hold the wheel of the 2-time Tour de France champion. With the acceleration from Tadej Pogacar and the gap opening up, Filippo Ganna, the Ineos rider, he has to close the gap around Søren Kragh Andersen, and then poor Wout van Aert, who's just starting to get back on, he's got to close around too. Now we got 4 guys in the front. Tadej Pogacar's going full gas. Filippo Ganna's locked onto his wheel finally. Wout van Aert's just starting to close the gap to finally seal the deal as we're starting to come up to the right bend in the road. Then when Wout van Aert closes, Mathieu van der Poel is latched on to make 4 guys at the front. Behind, there's some action happening as we see Matej Mohoric is trying to close the gap, but he can't, and the gap is starting to extend with Mads Pedersen on his wheel, and of course with the Alpecin de Koenig rider Søren Kragh Andersen. Now once the cameras go back up front, all of a sudden we missed the big attack. It was put on by Mathieu van der Poel with 200 meters to go to the summit of the Poggio. Just as the left side of the road was starting to bend and the wall was there, Mathieu van der Poel threw in an acceleration. He's got a gap on Tadej Pogacar. Filippo Ganna still locked onto the Slovenian's wheel, and Wout van Aert is starting to come off the back again. We go up to the top left turn here at the summit of the Poggio. It's a 2-second gap for Mathieu van der Poel, who rounds the left bend. Once he starts down the descent, when pictures pick up the camera from behind, we see the 3 chasers. It's Tadej Pogacar on the front, Ganna sitting second, and Wout van Aert behind is another 3-4 seconds back to the group of 3 back there chasing those guys. Up front, Mathieu van der Poel's going full gas as we start the descent proper, flying through all the corners but not taking maximum risk. Looks like he's got his bike under control the whole time. When we go back to the 3 chasers though, Filippo Ganna's having all kinds of problems holding Wout van Aert's wheel going down the descent, as every time they're coming out of the corners, there's a gap, and Tadej Pogacar's behind Filippo Ganna from Team Ineos. With that in mind, that means you got Mathieu van der Poel solo, you got Wout van Aert solo, and you got Filippo Ganna in the win the whole time. Takes all the way to just down to the bottom of the Poggio before we see Filippo Ganna close the gap up on the Wout van Aert, and the 3 riders start working together to try to bring back Mathieu van der Poel, whose 2-second gap at the summit has now turned into 5, 6, 7 seconds as we get off the Poggio proper. And Mathieu van der Poel looks like he's got Milan-San Remo wrapped in the bag, but remember, it's a 2-time Tour de France champion back there. It's Wout van Aert, and it's a world time trial champion chasing 3 against 1 up front. But Mathieu van der Poel up front, he's going full gas. He's not holding anything back as he's going all the way to the line with 1K to go with just over an 8-second gap on the 3 chasers behind. We see a little bit of hesitation as Filippo Ganna pulls all the way to the right side of the road when he probably should have went to the left to make the road a little bit shorter. We see Wout van Aert doesn't have the legs to really close the gap as he follows all the way to the right side. And with that, once we see 1K to go, we know Mathieu van der Poel is going to win Milan-San Remo. He looks right over his shoulder, checks and see if it's clear. It is, as the rider from the Netherlands does one more big push and starts celebrating all the way to the line here of Milan-San Remo to take his 3rd monument victory of his career. Let me remind you guys, he has 2 Tour of Flanders and now 1 Milan-San Remo. Now behind what was happened, Filippo Ganna jumped the other 2, got a little bit of a gap with about 250 meters to go, held on for 2nd. 3rd place, as we look at the picture coming to the line, it's Wout van Aert that holds off Tadej Pogacar to round out the podium here of Milan-San Remo, and the Slovenian's going to have to be satisfied with 4th place here at Milan-San Remo. Back in the group, they all come into the line together. Julian Alaphilippe did eventually catch on to those guys, but he'll finish 11th on the stage. The big surprise in the top 10, Neilson Powless from EF Education, the American rider, did a solid ride to finish in the top 10 here at Milan-San Remo. Now, when we dissect the tactics here, what really happened, I want to take you guys all the way back to Strade Bianche. Remember, Strade Bianche was taking part, and Mathieu van der Poel said, hey, I would like to have Wout van Aert here. I would like to have Tadej Pogacar here because it makes my work easier. This is what he's talking about at Strade Bianche when we see here at Milan-San Remo. He knows with these 2 big-time favorites here, he can sit back and let them do all the work, right? Mathieu van der Poel, the last time up the Poggio, he did an amazing job of following the wheels. You see when he followed Matej Mohoric closing the gap around Matteo Trentin and Pello Bilbao without having to close that gap himself. And then you saw with Tadej Pogacar's attack, we saw that it was Wout van Aert that closed the gap for Mathieu van der Poel. Once he throws in that big-time acceleration, he hasn't been in the wind the whole time, and he had his teammate Soren Kragh Andersen always up there helping him out if something needed to happen. So Mathieu van der Poel, what he's talking about at Strade Bianche about the racing being easier is shown here firsthand when we're going up to Poggio about what he's talking about. Every time when all the lights are sitting there watching everyone else, Mathieu van der Poel can kind of sit back a little bit and take all of the glare off of himself, put it on the other 2 big riders, and then he gets the free ride up the Poggio to be able to attack 200 meters before the top, hold everyone off down the descent when he knows Filippo Ganna can't go down the descent. Tadej Pogacar put on a great show, and afterwards his director said, hey, we did the most we can, but honestly, you always got to leave a little bit something in reserve to be able to follow an attack by a Mathieu van der Poel or a Wout van Aert, someone of that ability that you know has great form when we're talking about Milan-San Remo and we're talking about the smaller climbs. So Tadej Pogacar probably extended himself just a little bit too much here at Milan-San Remo, and that's what keeps him out of the running for a win when it's all said and done. Now, Wout van Aert, he gave big praise in his interview about Mathieu van der Poel being the strongest guy. But honestly, when I'm sitting up here on the butterfly effect, I think Mathieu van der Poel was just the smartest guy here at Milan-San Remo. And I never heard any of the commentators really give him credit about tactically how smart Mathieu van der Poel is. Let me remind you guys, he won last year's Tour of Flanders against Tadej Pogacar, sitting on the Slovenian all the time throughout all of his multiple attacks to win in the sprint with 200 meters to go. Did the same thing here with 200 meters to go before the top of the Poggio. And if we take a look at some other wins, when we're talking about beating Wout van Aert, many times he had Wout van Aert doing twice as much work as he would, and then he would just sprint away from Wout van Aert to take victories, but take big-time classic victories and put those on his resume. Here was another fine example of a quality rider winning with excellent tactics. Today, Mathieu van der Poel, you were absolutely spot on brilliant. When we saw you up to Cipressa, always in perfect spot. Cresting the top of the Cipressa at the front, backing off down the descent, having your teammates put you in a perfect position to start the Poggio. And then on the Poggio, something brilliant how you followed all the wheels at the right moment, only to light everybody up with 200 meters to go before the summit of the Poggio, and then drop down and win Milan-San Remo for your third monument victory here of your career. Congratulations, Alpecin Deceuninck, who started the season off, remember, before Tirreno-Adriatico with no wins. Now they have 2 wins at Tirreno-Adriatico from Jasper Philipsen, both lead-outs done by Mathieu van der Poel, and of course the win here at Milan-San Remo from Mathieu van der Poel himself. Amazing race to watch today. I enjoyed every minute of the finish. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next edition real soon.